Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the potential of UConn moving and joining the Big 12, leaving the Big S, the Big East, and their independent marking in college football to join up with one of the Power 4 conferences. In this segment here, we are moving on with our 32nd out of 32 teams to preview in the NFL, finishing it off with the always consistent Pittsburgh Steelers. In this segment here, we're going to go over their offseason, everything that they did, and give them a grade. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, go ahead and throw that in the chat. Throw it in the comments. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday afternoon. I would be remiss before we get into the Steelers, though, if I didn't mention that my Washington Nationals are calling up Dylan Cruz, the number 3 overall prospect tonight. I cannot wait. I'm going to be going to that game after this show. I know that was off topic, but getting into the Steelers here. The Steelers had, I would say, a good offseason. I know it's been marred by a lot of questions, a lot of uncertainty up in the air, especially surrounding the quarterback situation, the quarterback drama. But I think either one they go with is an upgrade. And you know what? That's where we'll start here. The Steelers improbably made the playoffs at 10-7 last year. Once again, Mike Tomlin does his thing, gets them over 500, sneaks them into the playoffs. Unfortunately, they lose in the first round. They lose to the Buffalo Bills in what was not a very close game or a very good game by the Buffalo Bills either. But either way, the Steelers can't match up. They were relying on Mason Rudolph, Kenny Pickett. Not a good situation to be in last season, right? Now, they get rid of both of them. They're both gone. Kenny Pickett, traded to the Eagles. Mason Rudolph, out in free agency. Doesn't matter. They bring in Russell Wilson on a vet minimum deal, $1.2 million. That is the epitome of low risk, high reward. Russell Wilson is a guy that we've all seen it. At his best, is a Pro Bowl quarterback. Been to 9 Pro Bowls in his career. At his worst, is okay, good enough, better than what they had last season. At his worst is with the Broncos. And if we're being honest with ourselves, he wasn't good. I'm not going to sit here and tell you he was good. But I would take him in a heartbeat over Kenny Pickett. Point blank period. I don't see a world where Kenny Pickett, even in the Denver Bronco days of Russell Wilson, was better than him. So automatically, upgrade at quarterback. And you say, wow, that's awesome. That's all they needed. They have that stout defense. The wide receiver core is pretty solid. The offensive line improved over the draft. The running back room is really good. You've got 2 backs there. But then they trade for Justin Fields, right? Trade a 6th round pick again. Low risk, high reward. You're not paying too much money for him. You're not paying too much. He's a very talented quarterback, a guy that people were having legitimate arguments about whether they should keep him and draft Marvin Harrison or trade the number 1 overall pick and hold on to him instead of drafting Caleb Williams. Now, obviously, all of that was in vain. That was never going to happen, but still, there were real conversations there. He was good enough to pass up on quarterbacks last year, one of which CJ Stroud, who turned out to be incredible, the other Bryce Young, who they probably would have drafted. You can make the argument there who would have been better. But again, 2 years in a row where the Bears had to make that decision. They decide to move on. He goes to the Steelers, and now you have a quarterback discussion. You have a quarterback discussion that still has not been figured out. And that is the big question of the offseason. What are the Steelers doing at quarterback? Because the rest of their offseason was really good. They bring in Patrick Queen to bolster that defense. That's awesome, right? They draft Troy Fautanu to bolster the offensive line. The offensive line looks wonderful now. It's a great, although I will say the offensive line hasn't looked good in the preseason, but, on paper, that offensive line looks pretty good. They improved it a lot, right? But, and that defense is still going to be great. You still have TJ Watt, a defensive player of the year candidate. You still have Minkah Fitzpatrick, who, in my mind, should also be a defensive player of the year candidate, but not an award safeties win that often. I believe the last one to do it was Troy Polamalu, and that was a very long time ago. But this is a Steelers team that has no holes other than quarterback. No holes is a bit of an overstatement, but this is a really good Steelers team. They had a very good draft. In fact, it was so good, it was the consensus number 1 draft, which, crazy to think that the consensus number 1 draft wasn't the Bears with Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze, but whatever. The Steelers always draft solid. They had a really good draft. Check mark on the draft. They're doing everything right. They even extend Mike Tomlin, who that's good enough. 17 years of not a losing season is worth an extension. Although there were some talks that he might get fired because, the Steelers haven't won a playoff game since 2016. So there are legitimate gripes against Mike Tomlin, but he's one of the best coaches in the league, maybe even the best coach right now. But this is a Steelers team that has the biggest dilemma, and it's at quarterback. And the issue is the famous line, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. This splits the locker room. Both Justin Fields and Russell Wilson think they're going to be the starter. Mike Tomlin says he would announce it at the end of the work week, so we're looking at a Friday kind of timetable here, just a couple days before the game. That is ridiculously close. You can't leave your offense waiting. Now, maybe that's a strategy. Week 1 against, a good team in the Falcons. Maybe you're trying to confuse them, not tell them who you're going to play. Got to prepare for 2 quarterbacks. Makes it tough on that defense over there. I doubt that's what Tomlin's doing. I think this is a situation where neither of these guys won the job. But you have to start one of them, and you have to think what's going to be best for the team. Do you want to go with the versatility of Justin Fields? He adds that extra option to the run game. Do you want to go with the veteran presence of Russell Wilson, a guy that, you brought in on the cheap, probably said he's going to be the starter, but he hasn't earned it, right? This is a tough question to deal with. And I am not envious of Mike Tomlin and the Steelers for having to make this decision. Now, if it was up to me, I'd give it to Justin Fields. Now, maybe Russell Wilson gives you a slightly better chance at winning games, but for my money, they're about even. And Justin Fields just allows you to open up the playbook a lot more, and Arthur Smith loves to run his play action. That's what he was successful in Tennessee. Ryan Tannehill being able to run the ball in Tennessee with Arthur Smith really helped that offense as well. You put Jalen Warren and Najee Harris together with the rushing threat of Justin Fields. I think that is a great combination, especially when outside of, George Pickens, that wide receiver room is bare. You draft Michael Wilson out of Michigan. He's a slot receiver, not really going to fit, right? Not the way you want. You have Van Jefferson, deep threat, nice to have. He's not a guy you want to rely on, right? This is not a wide receiver room that is awesome. You have Pat Freiermuth, but this is a team that's going to want to run the ball. This is a team that's identity is going to be run the rock, win in the trenches, just dominate your opponents physically. And right now, they're not doing that. And I think Justin Fields is going to be the best at doing that because of that extra ability to stretch the defense with his legs personally that Russell Wilson used to have, but has lost in his, I won't say old age, but in his veteranship. He doesn't move the same that he did when he was in Seattle. So this is a tough decision. My money, I'd go with the younger guy, especially since he might even be the future Russell Wilson. You know what you're getting. You don't expect much out of him, right? Justin Fields could be a guy that you sign for the long term, but you have no idea if you don't play him this year. So there's a lot of decisions to be made. Overall, this isn't going to affect the offseason. They did the most important thing, which was improve at the quarterback position. I'm going to give them an A. They killed it at the draft. Free agency, they did a really good job signing the guys that they needed to sign. And They improved at quarterback. I'll say it again. Check, check, check. They did everything right. I'm gonna give them an A, not an A plus, but just an A. They did a really good job in their offseason. You just need to figure out the quarterback. I believe in Mike Tomlin. I think he's a great coach. I think he'll make the right decision. But I think this is a decision you need to make before Wednesday for your team to be successful. Not only does it give a disadvantage to the Falcons in week 1 for their defense, but it gives a disadvantage to your offense because now you have to prepare for 2 playbooks, and that's not fun. We'll see. Shots below the belt says, I feel like both players have something to prove. Wilson playing to turn the negative perception of his legacy in the NFL. Fields playing for his future and proving the Bears made a mistake. You're absolutely right. They both have things to prove. But like I said, I'm going with the younger guy because Russell Wilson, while he wants to turn it around, I don't think anybody is going to remember his legacy as, that guy that was awful, right? They're going to be like, oh, he was really good, and then he fell off a cliff in one of the worst trades in NFL history, right? That's obviously going to be a part of his story, and I honestly just don't see a way that he is going to play well enough to turn it around on this Steelers team. Fields, at least, like you said, he's playing for his future. This is a guy that the Steelers could sign for the long term. It's one of those things that I do understand starting both of them. I really do, because I think, honestly, if you were to analyze them one for one, they're probably about tied in who's the best. You go by rating or whatever. They're probably about tied. But this is a decision that they have to make for the good of their football team sooner rather than later. So we'll see what happens. But we're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we'll go over the Steelers' record, game by game, all 18 weeks, all 17 games, see if Mike Tomlin can continue his streak of going over 500 at least, 500 or better at least, for 18 straight years at this point. Tough stuff scheduled down the stretch, but we'll see if I have him doing better than that. So stick around. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the Pittsburgh Steelers offseason. Really good offseason, in my opinion. I ended up giving them an A for their grade. I believe they're only the second team I've given an A all year long, but they're the final team, ending up on a good note. We'll see if their record will do the same. They're going for over 500, or 500 or better, I should say, for the 18th straight season under Mike Tomlin. We'll see if I have them doing that. Vegas does not. They have their line set, I believe, at 7.5 right now. So we'll see. It is a brutal schedule down the stretch. But before we get into their schedule, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments, throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday afternoon. But like I was saying, in this segment here, we are going to finish off our show today going through all 18 weeks, all 17 games of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And starting off strong, like I said, week 1, they take on the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons are a team that I think have much improved, even since we did our preview video of them. Obviously, when I said that, their weaknesses were corner. They went out and they haven't really fixed that, but they went out and got another safety, Justin Simmons. They went out and traded for a star pass rusher, another one of their biggest weaknesses in Matthew Judon. They still have A.J. Terrell, who they gave that massive contract to. This is a Falcons team that really improved on offense and recently on defense. I'm giving this a win to them. Again, excuse me, I apologize. This is a team that really did improve, but this is a Steelers team that I think their defense is going to be a little much for the Falcons to handle. I read my notes wrong here. I had the Steelers taking this one in Atlanta in week 1. Week 2, they take on the Broncos. Maybe, possibly, a revenge game for Russell Wilson. But we saw what happened in his last revenge game. His last revenge game against the Seahawks, that didn't go too hot. He doesn't seem to have an ounce of revenge in him. He says he's dangerous, but like he doesn't have that revenge mentality in him. He's a good soul, right? And because of that, I have the Broncos taking this game at home. Week 3, they take on the Los Angeles Chargers. This is another team that's going to try and play a lot like they are. Run the ball. Hard-nosed football, win in the trenches. And I think that the Chargers, at least through the preseason, have shown that they're better at doing that. Also, I like Justin Herbert a lot more than either of these quarterbacks. I'm giving... I apologize. Once again, I read it wrong. Again, my fault. I'm giving this one to the Steelers. Both of these teams, again, play the same way, but the Chargers defense isn't the same as the Steelers defense. So the Steelers improved to 2-1. Then they take on the Colts on the road. Lots of road games to start off. Anthony Richardson, I think, is going to be a problem this year. Tough for any defense to stop. I'm giving this one to the Colts. They fall to 2-2 on the year. Then they get Jerry Jones and the Cowboys. New paid man, CeeDee Lamb, is going to run wild on them. I just don't see a world where he doesn't get about 200 yards in this game. Cowboys win this one as well. Then they take on the Raiders on the road. And this one I think is going to be really close. You have two potential Defensive Player of the Year candidates going up against each other. I'm taking the Raiders in this one. If there is a weakness on the Steelers team, it's at the cornerback position. And Devontae Adams is going to carve them up. As good as Minkah Fitzpatrick is on the back end, he's not a cover guy. And Gardner Minshew loves to feed his number one receiver. So I'm giving this one to the Raiders as well. Then they get the Jets, another top defense matchup. Two of the best defenses in the league from last year going up against each other. I am going to give this one to the Steelers. I think that the Jets' offensive line might have a little bit of struggles. They're older, they're injury prone. I think the Steelers can steal this one at home against the Jets. Back-to-back matchups against New York teams. They get the Giants in the next week. This one also at home. This one should be easier. Daniel Jones is nothing compared to Aaron Rodgers. They take a New York sweep, take both of those teams at home in back-to-back weeks, improve to 4-4 through 8 weeks. The Steelers, of course, have a balanced schedule. Week 9 bye. Always. Right in the middle, a good spot for that team to be, right where you want it. Be prepared for this brutal back half of the schedule, something that a lot of teams have been, a lot of people in the media have been talking about as one of the worst stretches. Although, for my money, again, I think the hardest stretch in football is the last 6 weeks the Dolphins have to go through. I think that is the most brutal stretch that any team in the NFL this year has to go through. It's not going to be easy for them. But the Steelers start off their bye week against the Commanders. Jaden Daniels, I think, is going to be a stud. This should be a good game, but I'm going to give this one to the Commanders. The Steelers fall to 4-5. Then they get, surprisingly, their first division game of the year, all the way in week 11. That is a lot. That's why this is one of the most brutal schedules, because this is a really good division. But the Steelers like to play their division tight. They're very good at playing in their division against their division. They take the Ravens on at home, and I think they're going to take this win as well. Improve back to 5-5. Second division game in a row. A brutal stretch. Division games are brutal. It'll wear you down. They take on the Browns on the road. I'm giving this one to the Steelers. The Steelers play good games against the Browns. The Browns play good games against the Steelers as well, but I think the Steelers take this game. They improve to 6-5 on the year. 3 straight division games in a row. They're going to play 4 of them in a row. It's not an easy ask. 4 out of their 6 division games are in a row, almost directly out of the bye. That is brutal. They get the Browns again, this time at home. They took care of them on the road just 2 weeks ago. I think they'll do it again. They improve to 7-6 on the year. Then they get the Philadelphia Eagles, a cross-state rival. Could practically call this a division game, although maybe I'm just making this a stretch. But I think they can take down this Eagles team. This is a team that has its share of weaknesses, especially its quarterback and its coach aren't getting along, and that could really hurt. So I'm giving this one to the Steelers. They improve to 8-6 on the year. Then they get the Ravens, the second to last division game of the year. This one is on the road in Baltimore. They're not sweeping the Ravens. That is a bitter matchup. They're not going 2-0. The Ravens take it this time as they fall to 8-7. Then they get the two-time defending Super Bowl champion Chiefs. This is not an easy schedule down the stretch. All but one of these teams that they're playing, I have predicting over 500, and that one team is the Commanders, who I think could surprise some people this year. But they get the Chiefs, two-time defending Super Bowl champions, Patrick Mahomes under center. It's going to go how you think it's going to go. The Chiefs are going to take care of business on the road. They fall to 8-8. They're in danger now, 8-8. But you know Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin doesn't fall below 500. It's just not something he does. They get the Bengals to close out the year. This is huge for both teams. The Steelers are eliminated at this point. It's going to take 10 wins to make it to the playoffs. But this is for Tomlin's legacy. You know, this is for his stat. They win this game. They take care of business, beat the Bengals on the final week of the season, making the Bengals lose this division, actually. That's how tight of a race this division is. They improve to 9-8. Maybe this is just wishful thinking on my part. Maybe I just kind of want this to happen again. But I think there is absolutely a world where the Steelers could continue this streak. Now, I will say their ceiling, 9 wins, 10 wins maybe, especially with the way that this quarterback is going. Their floor, we're looking at 6 to 7 wins. So this is a team that I was maybe a little bit nicer to than some of the other teams when we were doing our predictions. But this is still a team that has all the skill in the world. You go up and down the roster. Their defense is one of the most talented. They were 9-2 in one-score games, which might be a negative stat, might be a positive stat, because that team didn't change much. You know, maybe they were relying a little too much on their defense, but if there's going to be a defense to rely on, that's one of the clutchest defenses there are. Improvements at the quarterback position, a great draft. I have no reason to doubt this team can go 9-8. It is a tough schedule down the stretch, but I do think that they can do it. But let me know what you think the Steelers are going to do. Am I way off on my predictions here? Do you think Mike Tomlin's streak will finally end at 17 years? Let me know what your thoughts are. We'll be back tomorrow. Same time, same place. Going over all the major news from around the world of sports. We're going to start a fantasy football preview for the week. We're going to go over my rankings here over this next week, as well as any other major breaking news from around the world of sports. You've been listening to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. I'll see you same time, same place tomorrow. You all have a good one. Good night.